where if we can tap into bliss, we start to see alternatives and new pathways, new ideas start to sprout. Hello and welcome to the Business of Happiness podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Tarryn MacCarthy, and today is going to be a great day. Today we are talking about the critical importance of following your bliss, not just in your personal life, but in business as a skill of exceptional leadership, as a skill in finding enormous success. Also in relationships and just in terms of your greater purpose in life. I'm going to take you through a few steps of how to tap into what your bliss is and how to find it, and then tools for how to follow it. I've been through this myself before. I know the power of tapping into and listening to your bliss. And I'm excited to share that with you because it has made an enormous impact in my life. Enormous in so many regards, in terms of my happiness and in terms of my success in business. So join me as we get into this discussion about why following your bliss is so important, as Joseph Campbell said. Before we get started, I want to say thank you and welcome to all of our newest members at the Business of Happiness Hive. Welcome, guys. The Business of Happiness Hive is a private Facebook group. Find us over there, ask to join, be a part of the community. We just finished a phenomenal 31-day gratitude challenge to increase our happiness and appreciation for the abundance in our lives and in our businesses. So join us over on the Business of Happiness Hive, and we look forward to meeting you there. And today, as I mentioned, we are talking about the importance of following your bliss. You know, it's fascinating to me because this is not a new concept. This phrase was actually coined in the 70s. Joseph Campbell said, follow your bliss. And I think it's been a little bit misconstrued over time, but it wasn't new to Joseph Campbell either. It's been around for centuries because this is the truth of how to find enormous success. And I mean success in the greater sense of the word, in the word that applies to you. Even William Shakespeare said, no profit grows where no pleasure is taken. And it's fascinating because we forgot that along the way. Society and pressures of obligations have stepped in our way and forced us to forget how important tapping into our own joy and bliss is for the greater success and for our opportunity to be who we are. This is how the greats are more creative, are more inventive. It's when they're getting into this place of bliss. Another word for bliss is flow. You may have heard of this concept before as well. It's when you're in that place where everything just seems to be going right and you almost step out of time because you're just having such a great time. You feel so good about yourself. I use the phrase, when you feel good, you can do good. And I mean that in terms of greater perspective. You can do good, meaning you can make decisions that are proactive, creative, inventive, and have great outcomes, as opposed to making decisions out of a place of fear or concern or limit or lack. Making decisions out of a place of feeling great about yourself and feeling great about your intuition, that's where power sets in. That's where real big change can happen. This is true for so many enormously successful athletes who have broken barriers that we thought never could be broken. It's when they stepped into this place of bliss. Now, from a neurochemical standpoint, we know that bliss is when the dopamine and the norepinephrine is flowing, so we can have more options available to us. When we limit and constrict ourselves in the sympathetic nervous system to fight, flight, or freeze, we only have 3 options: fight, flight, or freeze. But when you can step outside of that and sit in a place of tapping into joy and bliss and flow, now we can think of other options. Now we can be more creative, and it feels good to do so. That's the strength of being able to pivot in business. This is what has shown us in the past year and a half how businesses have been able to creatively think of a new pathway, a new alternative, a new suggestion when COVID or lockdown has happened, or economic downturn, or even difficulty with staffing. We know that that's been happening in the workplace a lot recently. It's those businesses that were able to sit in a place of creativity and adventure and think outside the box. Those were the businesses that were doing really great things. Those are the businesses that have survived, and not just survived, but thrived. These are the concepts that greats like Michael Jackson was able to tap into. He said, follow your bliss. Literally, that's what Michael Jackson said. Follow your bliss and the universe will open doors where there once were only walls. Fabulous quote, because that's what happens. We start to see restrictions and limitations in life and in business, where if we can tap into bliss, we start to see alternatives and new pathways, new ideas start to sprout. George Lucas was a big, big follower of Joseph Campbell's teachings in terms of following your bliss. George Lucas, as you all know, enormously successful because he created an empire out of Star Wars. He created this enormous empire and so much more in terms of the far-reaching ability of his business, only because he was tapping into this fascination and curiosity with fantasy and worlds beyond ours. I mean, who would have thought that would have given him so much success and wealth and reach? Now he's able to do even more good things outside of filming. He's got philanthropic ventures and he's giving back to the community in such beautifully and enormously impactful ways. But it started out with tapping into his curiosity and his bliss, which meant creatures from outer space, literally fantasy. But when he was able to give himself permission to do so and honor that that's what lit him up, that's when he was able to see the bigger business plan, the bigger picture. You know, those few things that prevent us from getting into bliss that I had touched upon are obligation, distraction, expectation, and judgment. Obligation is when we tell ourselves other things are more important, when we feel like we have to do something first or instead of tapping into our happiness. How many times have you told yourself that over your lifetime? How many times have you held yourself back from doing something you really feel pulled to do or excited to do or just want to do because you feel like you have a greater obligation in the moment? And how many times have you left that feeling, that desire for decades and maybe never tapped into it? The second one is distraction. And this is an important part of tapping into your bliss, is finding a moment to be quiet with yourself, because we live a life of so many possible distractions, especially when one is attached to our hip in our pocket in terms of our cell phone. We've got a literal computer of distractions attached to us at all times. And so we get distracted from paying attention to our intuition, distracted from paying attention to what matters to us and lights us up. But that distraction also causes us to be distant from our own selves. That's when we get that feeling of, I don't even recognize the person I'm looking at in the mirror. That happened to me before, where I honestly did not recognize the person I was looking at. I had been so distracted and had been facing so many other obligations that I thought were more important than my own happiness, that I wasn't even present in my own body. I couldn't even tell you what brought me joy. It brings us to the third reason why we get separated from our bliss, and that is expectation. Our own expectations and our perceived expectations of others. You know, when we tell ourselves that other people expect something from us, That's what strips us of listening to our inner calling, our inner whisper that's telling us what's important. I realized the power of tapping into your bliss recently. Again, I keep getting hit upside the head by this realization of how impactful and how incredible it is when you do listen to your intuition. I think it was January. It was January 2020. Sorry, 2021. And my husband and I woke up in the morning and we just were having a brilliant day. And I would call that day a day of flow. Everything just felt so good. I was just listening to myself. I didn't have any expectations of myself that day. I was just living life for the moment. And so was he. And he went swimming and I was so happy for him. And I remember feeling this feeling of, just being enormously excited for him to go for a swim. Being able to be so peaceful and at peace with yourself that you can literally feel the excitement for someone else. There was no benefit for me for him going for a swim, but I could tap into how excited he was to go for a swim. I could literally own that feeling of excitement. That's how much in the flow of the moment I was that day. I was just enjoying so many colors in my garden. I was meditating outside and I just felt a part of every flower and the wind that was blowing. And that day we went to look at a house and we weren't thinking of moving. This was a suggestion that my sister-in-law had made. She's a realtor and she said, "Oh, here's a fabulous house." And we thought, well, let's go look at it. We were having such a great day. We were having so much fun that when we got there, this house seemed incredible. We had fun at the house and we started envisioning ourselves living there and potential for ourselves at that house and what our family would be like at this house. We were just so excited, living in bliss. And that very night we made an offer on the house. Crazy, absolutely crazy. But see what would have happened if we weren't in that place of bliss and happiness. I can imagine a million different obligations and expectations and excuses that could have stepped in my way to prevent us from buying that house. There's no good reason for us to have sold our house and bought another one. We didn't have any need, but man, were we living in a moment of fun. We were tapping into that blissful feeling where we felt on top of the world. Let's fast forward now a couple months down the line. We've sold our house. We've moved into this new one. It's incredible. I love this house. I still cannot believe how lucky we are to be in this house, that we found this gem. This is so much fun. Success beyond my wildest imagination. I mean, I can't imagine ever having had dreamt up this house. What we saw, what we were able to tap into, what opened our eyes to possibility was that feeling of bliss, that feeling of tapping into our own intuition and letting the moment happen and feeling great about it. When you feel good, you can do good. This is how I was able to make an enormous success of my dental practice too. It's easy. You can say, Tarryn, it's easy for you to say in your private life, just feel good and do good, and then you'll have great success. How does that translate into business? It translates perfectly. When I started my dental practice a little less than 5 years ago, I thought, what will bring me joy? I have this great skill. I have a great talent. I can straighten teeth. I'm really good at it. I've put in the work. I have acquired this great skill and I love doing it. What will bring me joy? That has been the starting point of every business decision along the way. I tapped into my values because that brings me joy. Because when I'm aligned with my values, I am in a place of flow and bliss. And when we're not, when we feel that separation and that anxiety, that's when we step out of our integrity and our alignment with our own values. So just by saying to myself, what would bring me joy? I could start to create literally a business model. We did that this month. I mentioned it in the preamble about the gratitude challenge on the Business of Happiness Hive. Well, month of May has also been the gratitude month at Embrace Orthodontics. Why? Because this brings me joy. If you're listening to this podcast, chances are you didn't get into business to be miserable. The problem is that people feel that if their business gets busier, if they start becoming more successful, that happiness will eventually set in. But it can actually get worse. This is why I created the Business of Happiness Prosperity Coaching. In this one-on-one coaching, we look at how to redefine success on your terms and re-find the joy and the passion in your dream. Visit me at thebizofhappiness.com and become the happiest business owner you know. As the business owner, as my position as the leader, I tap into what will bring me joy. What brings me joy is gratitude. What brings me joy is sharing that with other people. So guess what? I put it as part of my business model. Every May, we have a gratitude month at Embrace Orthodontics. It is enormously successful because what I was able to do is think creatively because I'm in that place of flow, because being in a place of gratitude puts me in a place of flow. So I ask you, what puts you in a place of flow? What is it? It probably isn't a gratitude practice. It might be. I highly suggest it. I think it works really well. But it might be painting for you, or landscaping, or singing, or connecting people with one another. What is it that brings you enormous joy and flow when you feel like you've literally stepped out of time, where you look at your watch and you think, oh my gosh, 13 hours have passed. I was speaking to a client this morning and she said, I remember I was quilting, and I didn't even realize that 13 hours had passed. She was in her place of excellence, tapping into creativity, tapping into flow. So how do you get it? How do you get there? When you've had decades worth of practice of not listening to yourself, how do you find your bliss? Well, number one, you get really quiet. You get really still. You find time on your own, by yourself. I personally like getting into nature, but it can be anywhere you like. It actually brings up the second aspect, which is creating a space and time to do so. And I don't mean just once, because inspiration's not going to hit you that one time that you do. It might if it's a spiritual moment for you, but more likely you're going to have to keep this practice for a while. This is why so many of the greats do meditation on a daily basis. It's what works for me as well. I know that every day I'm going to dedicate 15 to 30 minutes to quiet meditation by myself. And in being a practice, it means that you strengthen that skill over time. You hone that skill over time, but just allowing yourself to be outside of obligation, outside of expectation, outside of distraction, outside of judgment, just finding quiet time by yourself. I first started finding this place, interestingly, running. Running for me was very meditative. I didn't realize it at the time, but that's a place where I found my flow, where I could get lost in the steps and in the monotony of running and the beauty of the environment around me. So that was one way that I was able to tap into my bliss. And the second part of it is reaching out and taking action. And sometimes the taking action part means just thinking about it, and sometimes it means actually doing something. So you might not know that your bliss is found on horseback, so you've got to actually get on a horse to try and see. Sometimes just thinking about something will work, but sometimes you need to turn on a certain type of music. Maybe there's a certain music that brings out inspiration in you. And what you're looking for is that whisper inside of you, that creative calling that's unique to you. So who cares if no one else likes Dolly Parton? If you really love listening to her music and you get inspired by it, do that. And listen to yourself. Listen to your voice inside your own heart that's telling you what's important. Is it the message? Is it the melody? What is it that you're really enjoying in this moment? Why are you so happy when you go for a hike? Is it the beauty of nature? Is it the feeling of exercise? Is it feeling your breathing? Because maybe you've been living a life of shallow breathing and now it's forcing you to take in some deep breaths. What is it? And then in that moment, what do you really want? What will make you really happy? You know, giving ourselves permission is a critical third step. Giving yourself permission to do a little bit of this every single day. So perhaps what brings you bliss and enjoyment is relationships or family. So making a point of having a connection with somebody every single day, that's tapping into your bliss. Or creating connections at work. So for me, I know that bliss is found in gratitude and in supporting others and finding their gratitude and feeling empowered. So that's what I incorporated in my work every single day. It doesn't matter if you're not the leader or the owner of your business. Being the leader and the owner of your own dreams is all that matters. What you need to do is recognize what your dreams are. So if you feel so passionate about healing people with your hands through Reiki, or if you're a physical therapist and supporting patients, you're going to be focusing on that at work because you'll be finding yourself in that place of bliss and flow every day. And when it starts to feel uncomfortable, when it doesn't feel like bliss and flow anymore, ask yourself, is this what I want? And sometimes it's just a small nuance. You know, a client of mine was telling me recently that she loves working with her patients, but that her team members have constricted her to being more rigid with her treatment plans. And she really loves adventurous, creative treatment plans and treating every patient differently, but that her team members have felt a little uncomfortable and restricted her a little bit. So she's had to limit herself and create more of a recipe for her patients. But it doesn't feel so good. Notice what she's done. She's pulled herself out. She's now living by what she thinks is obligation or expectation. She pulled out her own bliss. She took her enjoyment of giving her best self and her expertise to her patients right out of the equation. And she put ahead of her joy and her bliss, she put obligation and expectation. And suddenly it doesn't feel like fun anymore. This is when we start to think, how do people ever imagine saying, do what you love and you'll never work a day in your life? Sometimes that saying can seem overwhelming. This is how they do it. They tap into their bliss. They find out for themselves what's important, what makes them feel good. As simple as that. I love to listen to Dolly Parton, then put Dolly Parton on at work. Literally, that seems so simple and small, but it's part of the practice of beginning to tap into what matters to you, what lights you up. And once again, if you ever think, I don't know what lights me up, close your eyes and just think to yourself, when was that last time you felt amazing? Can you remember that time? Can you remember that moment where you just felt like the world was there just for you? What were you doing? And do more of that. In fact, I argue, do it every day. Maybe it's not possible. Maybe what that is windsurfing, and you live in a part of the country where you can't windsurf every day. Well, read about it every day. Watch videos about it every day. Tap into it somehow every day. Or if it's the wind in your hair, then get on your bicycle and go fast down the road. What is it that's really making you feel alive? And tap into it. And base your business on your bliss. Put into your business your values, your mission. Put in your bliss. What's important to you? That's how you re-find yourself in your business. That's how you re-find yourself in your purpose. There's some myths about tapping into your bliss and listening to bliss and living your life in bliss. The first myth is it's too risky. And that's fear speaking. It's too risky to live life from a blissful standpoint. And the thing I want to remind you is the biggest risk is that you'll be happy. That's what it is. You'll be happy. We tend to think that we'll lose things, or what will happen if I don't just focus always on obligation and expectation? What will happen if I decide to just choose what makes me happy? Will I lose relationships? Maybe. Will I lose income? Maybe. But you'll pivot and you'll find something that matters more to you. A second myth is it means quitting your job. It does not. It does not mean that you have to quit your job. It might, but it might mean that you reintegrate what you love in the job that you have. It might mean that by tapping into what really lights you up, you remember what it was about your job that you chose. It reminds you why you're doing what you're doing. It's reminding you of your why. You do not have to quit your job. Although, maybe you do. If there's nothing that you can find in your job that's reminding you of your bliss or feels like bliss, then you should. Then you should change. If you can't incorporate joy and happiness into your everyday, then why are you doing it? A third myth is it means that only things that make you happy will get done in the day, that you can't do anything else other than just doing things that make you happy all day long. That's not true either. We have certain responsibilities, and in order to incorporate your bliss into your business, you need to build a business, right? The point is you're focusing on the bliss along the way. So, what is it that you don't love to do? Well, let's see, something that I don't love to do in my business. I don't love to be the bad guy and hold my team members accountable for their actions when they don't step up to their responsibilities, right? I don't love that, but it's an important part of the business. It's an important part of running a business is that each one of our team members is accountable and responsible for certain tasks. That's how we move forward. So there are things I need to put into place that aren't necessarily my favorite things to do. Well, in my situation, I ask myself, well, what would bring me most joy? What brings me most joy is to hire somebody who's really good at that. That's how I use this powerful practice of tapping into your bliss to ask my intuition, what do I need in this moment, right? A fourth myth about tapping into bliss is that it will bring you instant success. That's a myth. You won't instantly have the enormous success, but you will be on your journey to it. And every day you will have small successes. And believe me, just as Tony Robbins says that you can achieve so much more in a decade than you think you can. And you think you can achieve so much more in a year than you actually can. It's the long game. It's this constant practice of tapping into your intuition, tapping into what lights you up, tapping into your bliss that over the aggregate will give you this enormous success. And then the last myth is that you only have one bliss. And that's not true either. I've found many times that I've discovered new things that light me up. I never knew that I loved running as much as I did until I was in my 30s. That bliss was only something I found later in life. I never knew that I loved jazz until I was in my late 20s. I never knew that I loved podcasting until I was in my 40s. But this brings me bliss. This brings me joy. This brings me so much happiness. And why not allow myself to do this? Because this is what makes each of us unique. And if we all lived from that place of obligation and expectation all the time and listened more to our perceived judgment from others, we'd never find that beautiful, curious place that makes us unique and adds new creativity and invention in this world. You know, you are the most unique, every single one of you. And we find that uniqueness by tapping into what lights us up. You deserve to do so. So take some time. Find out, who is that person inside of me? What is it that lights me up? Why does that matter so much to me? That calling. Why does that call to me on a daily basis? And when I step into it and give myself permission to do so, I feel alive, because that matters. And the world is waiting for you to bring that beautiful self to us. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining me again in this episode. This is such a critical one for all of us, for the benefit of the whole world, if you will, but also most importantly to you and your own happiness. Because when you feel good, that's when you can do good. Bye-bye.